Okay, guys, this will be the second part of this series. It's a four-part series on the Great Depression. We're going to talk about FDR, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, 32nd President, United States. He is 51 years old at the time he takes office. He is a Democrat. He will win the office from Herbert Hoover, who did a terrible job during the Depression. Now, there's a couple of interesting things about FDR, and some of them you will see on your little attendance quiz. Number one, he was the president for 12 years, 4 terms. We've never had another president that had it for that long. He's the fifth cousin of Theodore Roosevelt, and he is kind of the father of the Social Security system that we have today. Now, he came from Harvard. He was very wealthy. But he also had polio. He is our wheelchair president. Probably the most interesting things people think about FDR is that the general public did not know the man was crippled. He wore big braces on his legs that locked him in place, and when he talked, he stood at a podium, and he usually had to balance himself to give his talks, but yet he was considered one of the most elegant speakers of any president we ever had. He is famous for the fireside talks that he had. FDR, I get a lot of FDR papers, probably between the two Roosevelts. And I will tell you, one of the things I always mention about FDR is historians will tell you that 3 presidents, 3 of them here, guys, have had the biggest challenge of all. George Washington was the first president. He had to learn how to do the job. The second is Abraham Lincoln. He is the president during the American Civil War. He has to deal with the American Civil War. And last is FDR. He is the president during the greatest economic downfall in the history of the United States, and he is the president during World War II, when we will face not only the Japanese, but the Germans, the 2 greatest armies on the face of the earth at this time. The United States will go to a total war with both of those. He will lead us to both of those events. I'd like to say he could lead us through them. However, he will not live to see the end of World War II. He is you will always see his name associated with the New Deal. One of the things I always like to point out is he is part of the Wartime Powers Act. That Wartime Powers Act will be the one that he will come in and basically seize gold from the U.S. citizens. As far as a world leader, I think he was a good world leader. I do think he underestimates Adolf Hitler, but many world leaders did, with the exception of Winston Churchill. He will come up with the Lend-Lease Act agreement that will help loan old battleships to Britain, because at this time, you got to remember, from 1939, Churchill and the British are in an all-out war with Germany. At this point, we're not involved in that. We will not begin that war until December the 7th, 1941, when the Japanese will attack Pearl Harbor. Now, something you'll see on a test, this is your general test, is the fact that Adolf Hitler declared war on the United States. We never declared war on Hitler. He declared December the 11th, 1941, Hitler will declare war on the United States, and it will therefore thrust the United States into the greatest war ever. And I want to end this lecture, guys, with trying to give you a good thumbnail sketch of what was going on. My father grew up during this time, and my dad, who is not alive anymore, told a lot of stories to me about the Great Depression and World War II. And I always like to share these stories in class. I want to quickly share this story with you. My dad was a young man. He grew up in a little town called Mansfield, Missouri, which my dad called it Missouri, not Missouri, and it is outside of Springfield. Some of y'all may or may not know where that's at. December the 7th is the day the Japanese hit Pearl Harbor. My dad was around about 13 years old. There was a group of men that were standing outside a filling station listening to a radio station. Important thing to remember, guys, not everybody then back then had TVs and radios, okay? And this one filling station had a radio, and a group of men were standing around and they were listening to it. And my dad said he walked up there. He was a young boy. He walked up there and he was listening to it. And this group of men we're all sitting around, and my dad said there was two common questions, or one common question, and this was their thing. First of all, none of these men, they're from southern Missouri, knew where Pearl Harbor was. My dad said one of them thought it was somewhere in the Pacific and it's a naval base, but he wasn't for sure. I've always thought that was interesting. The second assumption that these men had were that the Japanese as a race were all about 4 foot tall, all wore thick glasses, and these guys said this war will probably last 4 to 5 weeks. We'll go over to Japan. We're going to kick the blankety blank out of the Japanese, and this thing's over with. Guys, this war will last 4.5 years. We will have to unleash not one, but 2 atomic bombs in order to get the Japanese to surrender. It will cost thousands of American lives. Overall, World War II will cost millions of lives. So no, it was not we're going to go over there and kick tail and take names type deal. That's not what it was. And the sad thing, my dad told me the majority of those men that stood around and listened to that radio, the majority of them would be drafted, and a lot of them would not come home. So that will lead us into the last section of this lecture series, which will bring us into Adolf Hitler. All right, guys, bye.